Hello folks, this is David Hurley of easychesstips.com, your pub chess bluffer, who will attempt to take you through a game that I played with my regular partner, Dr. Morgami, last Wednesday evening. Once again, he was white and played d4, and I responded in sniper style, following the inspiration of Charlie Storey in his book, The Sniper, which means that against this d4 opening, I responded with g6. Now, the thing is, at this point, everything which is written in this book kind of breaks down because Dr. Morgami, when faced with the sniper, does something which is not discussed in this book. And that is, he responds with c3, which is also what happened in my previous video. He responds with c3, as if he's setting up a white Slav defense. He's playing rather defensively, even though he is white. I proceed with the classic first three sniper moves, or with the second and third sniper moves. The chess machine is recommending e4, but Dr. Morgami sets up a semi-Slav as white, playing very much a black style game here against my sniper opening. And I bring in that third move, c5. The chess engine is looking at nobbling the pawn, which is part of the idea. It pulls off the white's d pawn off center if white does claim that gambit pawn, and extends the bishop's reach down this diagonal. So that is not what Dr. Morgami did. He brings his knight to e2. I then did this once again. I brought my pawn, similar to the previous game that I showed on video, brought my pawn out to d6. And once again, I'm wondering whether this is the best thing to do at this stage, since if black does nobble the pawn, and I retake, it pulls my pawn over off center, as if to say that, which makes you wonder what the point of the exercise was in the first place. I like the pawn structure, but I'm not sure that this is the best move at this stage. Since we're out of the book, I'm not quite sure what Charlie would say about this as the fourth move. However, that is what I did once again, and we then have Dr. Morgami doing what he likes to do, which is a fianchetto bishop by moving g3. Now, at the back of Charlie's book, there's a little section, quite a brief section, on responding to the English opening. Now, we're not dealing with the English opening here, but the one thing, where's it gone? The one thing it does mention is how to respond to a white's fianchetto. And Charlie recommends a double sniper. So a double sniper bishop, in other words, a counter-fianchetto over here. Now, that is for the English opening. Whether or not it is really the effective thing to do in this setup, I don't know, but I had in mind that Dr. Morgami might well pull off this fianchetto bishop setup, because I've been quite uncomfortable in the sniper dealing with it, as he saw in a game that I lost against another one of our chess friends, who set up this bishop on the g2 h1 a8 diagonal. So I wanted to prevent too much control of that diagonal and prepare for a fianchetto, a counter fianchetto here. But actually, I don't think I ever achieved it. And in fact, I changed track, if we look at the advantage bar here, at the moment white has a slight advantage, which according at least to this machine, what I did was I went e5, There is a setup, but it's not this setup where you have this pawn structure here. The Bermuda Triangle it's called, but with these pawns further forward. So I think my idea here is to move my pawns forward to try and counter the diagonal threat of the bishop, which in fact is what I do achieve, but the machine doesn't like it very much. So anyway, after my E5 move, we had knight to A3. I countered with A6, but it doesn't prevent Dr. Morgami doing exactly what the computer recommends and bringing his knight in here, putting pressure on this pawn. Yeah, so knight 5, D5. I moved down to attack. Now this is, I think, a further weakening of my position. It looks strong, but what didn't happen in our game is that actually I go a pawn down if a series of exchanges are followed through with. It would go, let's see if I can find, well, it would go like this. Let's do it. If the knight takes the pawn, the knight takes the pawn takes the knight, the bishop takes the pawn, the queen takes the pawn, and the queen takes the queen, and the bishop takes the queen. And if you count up the pawns, you'll see that black is left with 6 pawns and white has 7 pawns. So white is building up a nice little advantage here. 1 pawn advantage with quite a few pieces off the table. It means that white's advantage should be pretty solid now. So not a great idea on my part, but we pub chess bluffers, we rely on our bluffing to create one more blunder in the opposition than we ourselves blunder over. So at the moment, I think Dr. Morgami has a blunder in hand, since I've been making 1 or 2 dodgy moves in this opening. There's nothing. This is not a representation of the sniper, which will come anywhere near the next edition of this book, I can assure you, or unless there's a chapter on how not to play the sniper. Anyway, none of that happened. Let's go back to my D5 move. D5, a weakening move, which gives white the opportunity to go a pawn up, but that didn't happen in our game. Instead, that knight retreated to D2. And as you can see, that loses white the advantage according to the machine here. So a weakening, blundering kind of move of mine has led to, so it's a threat. It looks to a weaker player at our level like a threat. And perhaps this move looks a bit risky. It seems safer to move away, but that gives black an advantage at this stage, at least according to this bar over here, this machine's analysis, Stockfish on lichess.org. So the knight has moved back, at which point the machine is recommending I take with my E pawn, but I take, in fact, with the C pawn. C takes D4. And then C takes D4. Then I move to E4, which it seems is actually what the computer likes, which is nice to know. Yeah, we're looking at various possible next moves. And actually we're following Stockfish, which is quite nice because Dr. Morgami then castled. Now, I think this is where I do some more pub chess blundering. Dr. Morgami castles, I bring my bishop out to G4, apparently pinning the knight to the queen, so it's not really much of a threat at all. In fact, the computer's put us on equality. And so bishop to where were we? Bishop to g4, queen to e1, returning the advantage to me. Obviously, Dr. Mogami is concerned about that pin and decides to do that. That's interesting. The computer is recommending an advance of the h pawn to send the bishop away. It would in fact send the bishop most likely away. Yes, it would send the bishop away. If the bishop goes there, he is trapped. If this pawn comes in, if the bishop goes here, this loses. Bishop takes bishop, pawn takes bishop, knight takes pawn. So there's a pawn advantage for white. So that's quite a nice little move. The bishop will have to run back somewhere along the track that he eagerly advanced down rather prematurely. However, it's the Pub Bluffer's pinning threat, and so the bluff, as it were, worked, and Dr. Mogami moves his queen probably to a less favorable position, e1. Queen to d7, not a particularly great move according to, well, yeah, the computer wants me to develop my knight, but I add some support to the bishop, so this is not a particularly great move. Knight to f3, knight to f4 is recommended, but the pawn comes up. The pawn is attacking. And yeah, the computer recommends that we do a pawn exchange here, which would probably have been the better thing. I had in mind that the whole point of getting my pawns there was to preserve, was to block out the bishop. This simple move here kind of overturns that. I moved instead my bishop. Now look what happens to the advantage bar. I have an advantage at the moment. This fairly weak move, just looking for a bishop exchange, which was not my original idea at all. It's a kind of step down from anything very ambitious. Immediately leads to a nice advantage for white, and white in fact preserves quite a big advantage through this middle part of the game. The middle game is where I think I suffer my greatest weaknesses, perhaps because that's the part of the game where you have to think so much. So bishop to h3, f here. It doesn't, the quick exchange doesn't happen, presumably because Dr. Mogami didn't want to see my queen arriving on h3. It looks threatening, but it may not be as threatening as it seems. Not everything that looks threatening is actually a real threat. Jeremy Silman is quite good on that point in one of his books. Where are we? Bishop to h3, f takes e4. Trying to clean out that the central pawn structure, trying to rather successfully doing it. Bishop takes g2, king takes g2, d takes e4, knight takes e4. Now, yes, the book is recommending the computer is recommending the queen hops over in front of the king to e7. But I wanted to pin the knight, which looks like a nice move, but you can see there's an immediate counter, which is that the knight simply, the e2 knight simply attacks the queen. It's one of those one-off moves that we pub chess bluffer types tend to eagerly make without looking at the full implications of these things. So queen to d5. Oh, look, I've pinned that knight. Aren't I clever? No, not clever at all, because the other knight has a simple riposte, which is to attack the queen and defend the knight at the same time. Duh. And so I think now I make the biggest blunder of the game. The computer is recommending that I simply retreat the queen back to square one, back to d8. Do I do that? No, I hop over here. Now look at what happens. It's practically game lost. If you're watching this, Dr. Mogami, this was a massive blunder. It's practically game lost. Why is it game lost? So, well, look at what the computer says, and you will see. Look at this. Rook takes pawn over here. At first sight, it looks crazy. It's not the kind of thing that a pub player might think about, because it seems as if the queen can immediately take back until you notice. Let's have a look here. Until you notice so that the knight can step in here, and if the knight steps in, not now, but if the knight steps in there, wait a minute. If the knight steps in there after the queen takes the rook here, then the knight is immediately forking the king and the queen. Let's go through it and you'll see what I mean. So the rook takes. Now I'll take, and then immediately the knight comes in here, check, goodbye queen. And yeah, it's pretty much game over for black at that stage. That's that move there. Now I came queen to e6. That's the recommended move, that rook takes the pawn on f7. However, as a chess bluffer, I survived because knight c5. The knight moves up to attack the queen. Now there's still a big threat here. I mean, I'm still under the cosh, but not quite as drastically as I could have been. Queen to c8. So the computer recommends that we go there. But I went down to queen to c8. Knight 3 to e4. Okay, we're back with the recommended moves. Queen to c7. Yes. Queen to c3 is the next recommended move. But in fact, sorry, that is what Dr. Mogami did. Queen to c3. Yeah, there are some nice threats coming in here. Now, again, why is this a threat here? And why is this move recommended? This move is being recommended to prevent this move here. This move, if the knight doesn't go back here, if nothing else apart from the queen is protecting this pawn, and the knight takes the pawn and the queen takes the knight, once again, this knight can come in here and fork the king and the queen. With these two knights out here in the middle of the board, white really does have a very big advantage. These knights are incredibly dangerous. They have so many ways to wriggle in and fork the queen and the king, or the king and another piece, or the queen and another piece, generally cause mayhem and break down black's structure. So, whose move is it? Queen to c3 here, so it's a good move. Knight g to e7. So I didn't go there and protect that pawn. Knight g to e7. I bring this knight out. And so, as you can see, that is pretty much another blunder. That's a game over blunder, effectively. So I think we need a refreshing draught of beer here. Yes, Kirin Ichiban Shiori. Right. Queen. So the recommended move is once again to take this pawn. The rook takes the pawn, and what happens? What does happen if the rook takes the pawn? The king takes. If the king takes, the queen comes over here, says check. The king retreats, and the knight comes in here attacking the queen. The queen has to retreat. The knight picks up the bishop. Dangers all around. But how to get back? Where are we? We're here. Okay, so that didn't happen. We are in this situation. Okay, so many opportunities to win this game, Dr. Mogami. Knight G to E7, double. I put double question marks over that. Queen to C4. Restoring. You still have an advantage, but this is restored. It gives me time to recover from here on. So this is a crucial blunder. This little move is not a game losing blunder. It's an advantage losing blunder. Compared to what we've been looking at with these knights and this rook coming in here, edging the queen up here, it appears to give you this double attack on this pawn. So this pawn is still weak. Queen to c4, knight to d8. At this point, yeah, it's recommended that I castle. By moving here, I think I am defending this pawn. This pawn is a very busy knight. I'm leaving my king in the center, which appears to restore white's advantage. D5, knight to F5. For white, the counter move is a check with queen to A4. But here we have what must be the biggest blunder of a game full of blunders. As I said before, the Pub Chess Bluffer's goal is to make fewer blunders than his opponent, or at least not make the last massive blunder. What we have here next is a blunder. It's an attempt at a sacrifice to open up the game, but it's a sacrifice that doesn't work. It's a rook for a knight sacrifice. The rook takes the knight. You see the effect. I've been in the doldrums. I've been at a massive disadvantage. I should have lost the game by now. I've hung in there. Dr. Mogami hasn't found the way through, and now he makes a mistake, looking to open up my defenses, but in fact restoring my advantage. I take with a tempo because I'm attacking the knight with that pawn, and from here on, it's the tables are turned now. D6 comes in. It looks as if the white attack is going on, but you see the advantage for black is simply increasing. This is not a terrible threat. We're now able to pin the knight to the king. The pawn plods on, checking the king, and the pawn is protected by this knight here. D7 check. Now, the engine is recommending that the king moves out, but I move the king across. It doesn't seem to do too much for it doesn't diminish my advantage too much. So I move the king across. And now we have queen to b4, planning there's a covered check here. So planning some kind of crafty maneuver with the knight, perhaps to come down here with a check coming in there. However, I feel that I can survive if I bring my king across. And in fact, my advantage is preserved according to the machine. King to g8. Knight takes b7. Knight takes b7. This is a disaster. Yeah. Knight takes b7. Knight takes b7 just closes out the game for me. One thing I should say is that we're running very low on time. We played these 30-minute games. We have to really make quite fast decisions at this stage in the game, if I may desperately try to excuse our blundering. So the knight takes the pawn. My queen now, I'm quite keen to take advantage of my advantage. So the machine doesn't like this very much. It probably thinks I should be a bit more patient and take the knight. This pawn can't promote to a queen, or it can promote to a queen, but gets immediately taken by the rook. And the king is still pinned by this. The queen is pinning the knight to the king, so the knight is still pinned with this threat here. So I decided to take the e4 knight and go in for a queen exchange. Ah, yes, a queen exchange. Now, this led to me completely winning the game because of the final massive game-killing blunder from which there was absolutely no return at all. Just a few minutes left on the clock. I bring my queen down, go check. The pub bluffers check. The king, Dr. Mogami moved his king, not noticing that the queen was en prise. Now that is pretty much game over. So the last few moves that come in simply to close out the game. There, we don't need to go any further than that. I do eventually trap the king up there. So yes, the point is that this, against the sniper, this white semi-Slav followed up by a fianchetto on the G file is quite a tough nut for me to break down. I was under the cosh. I only won this game because my blunders were not punished. Unfortunately for Dr. Mogami, his blunders were punished. I certainly deserved to lose, didn't deserve to win this game. I deserved to lose it. However, that's pub chess for you. The bluffer, the last bluff is the best one. I hope you've enjoyed this bluffers video and play some better chess. That's all from David Hurley of EasyChessTips.com.